It was one of those rare nights in Los Angeles when the rain didn't just pass through, it stayed. The streets were slick with water, reflecting the kaleidoscope of neon lights, red tail lamps, and blinking billboards that made the city pulse like a living organism. In the middle of this restless urban storm, under the cracked awning of an abandoned gas station near Skid Row, a little girl curled herself around her younger brother. Lila Grace was 10, though hardship had aged her eyes far beyond her years. She held her brother Noah close, trying to shield him from the cold as best she could with the remnants of a tattered jacket. He was burning up with fever, small body trembling against her chest. "You're okay, Noah," she whispered, brushing the wet strands of hair from his forehead.
"You're gonna be okay."
She wasn't sure if she believed her own words. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, and Noah had barely had half a sandwich all day. The rain wasn't letting up, and her socks squished inside her torn sneakers every time she shifted.
Just down the block, a slick black Tesla Model S pulled to the curb, cutting through the gloom like a ship on calm waters.
The door opened, and a man stepped out, holding an umbrella above his head. He wore a tailored suit and polished shoes that gleamed even in the rain. Ethan Walker, the Billionaire tech CEO, stood with the effortless confidence of someone who didn't just live in the world, he reshaped it. Beside him, Vanessa Stone, a supermodel with sharp cheekbones and an even sharper tongue, adjusted her coat and frowned at the surroundings. "Why are we stopping here?" she asked. Ethan's gaze had locked onto something, or someone, under the awning. "Just a second," he murmured. He approached slowly, umbrella in hand, eyes narrowing as he made out the shape of the two children. Lila tensed as he came near. Her arms instinctively tightened around Noah. "Hey," Ethan said gently.
"Are you two all right?"
Lila looked up, wary. Her voice was small but firm. "We're fine.
Just staying out of the rain."
He crouched slightly, keeping a respectful distance. Up close, he saw the purple shadows under her eyes, the gauntness in her cheeks, the sweat beading on Noah's pale face. "Your brother's sick," he observed. Lila didn't answer. She simply looked away, as if refusing to acknowledge a truth she couldn't afford to face. Ethan reached into his coat and pulled out a water bottle. "Here," he offered. Lila hesitated. Her pride flared, as it always did when strangers offered help. But then Noah let out a weak cough, and she took the bottle with a quick nod. "Thank you," she whispered. Vanessa had followed behind, heels clicking against the wet concrete. She took one look and rolled her eyes.
"Oh, Ethan, come on.
They're everywhere in this city.
If you stop for every sub-story, we'll never get home."
Ethan didn't move. "What's your name?" he asked the girl. "Lila," she said. "And this is Noah."
"How old are you?"
"I'm 10. He's 4. There was a pause. The rain kept falling, ticking against the umbrella like a broken clock. Ethan felt something shift inside him. Something old, brittle, and buried. He remembered a night just like this one, decades ago, when he sat alone on the steps of the city orphanage, soaked to the bone, waiting for a mother who never came back. And then softly, Noah stirred and looked up at Ethan with glassy eyes. His voice, hoarse but innocent, cut through the moment. "Do you have a mom?"
Ethan blinked. The question landed like a punch to the chest.
He felt the wind knocked out of him, not physically, but emotionally, as if some forgotten memory had been yanked from the bottom of a locked drawer. "I know," he said after a pause. "I don't." Noah nodded slowly and leaned his head back against Lila's shoulder, as if satisfied with the answer.
Ethan stood up.
He looked down at the two children, then back at Vanessa, who was now visibly impatient. "We should call someone," he said. "Call who?" Lila shot back, her voice suddenly sharp.
"Social service?"
"They'll separate us." Her words stopped him cold. "We've been through that before," she added. "They always split up siblings." Ethan didn't know what to say. She was right. He knew the system. He'd seen it from the inside. "We'll be fine," Lila said again, forcing her voice to stay steady. "We just need a place to stay dry tonight." Ethan wanted to argue, to insist they come with him, but something in her expression told him it wasn't that simple. He looked one last time at Noah, who had fallen asleep, lips slightly parted, cheeks flushed with fever. Then back to Lila, thin arms wrapped around her brother like a human shield against the world. "I'll come back tomorrow," he said. Lila didn't respond. Back in the car, Vanessa scowled. You're not seriously thinking about getting involved in whatever that is? Ethan didn't answer. As they pulled away, he stared out the window.
Rinrassait down the glass like tears.
The city passed by in a blur of lights, but his mind was still back there, under that awning, beside a little girl who reminded him what it felt like to be alone. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, holding a photo of himself as a boy. In it, he was standing outside the orphanage, face pale, eyes hopeful. A boy who had once waited for someone to care. Now, he wondered, was it his turn to become that someone? The next morning, Los Angeles woke up to a silver sky and the scent of wet asphalt. The rain had stopped, but the city was soaked, puddles and gutters, steam rising from the streets, and the occasional rumble of traffic echoing through the avenues. Ethan Walker sat in his dining room, untouched coffee growing cold in front of him. He had barely slept. His mind kept circling back to that girl, Lila, and her brother, curled up beneath that awning like forgotten pages in the back of a book. He had made the call to his assistant at dawn. I need a driver in 10 minutes, he had said. No press. No schedule today. Now, as his Tesla pulled up to the same street corner from the night before, Ethan's eyes scanned every doorway, every bundle of blankets, every corner where the forgotten tended to vanish. But the spot beneath the awning was empty. Gone. He stepped out of the car, his shoes splashing in the remnants of last night's rain. The street was still quiet, but there was no sign of Lila or Noah. He asked a vendor pushing a cart nearby, "Have you seen 2 kids? A girl, about 10. A younger boy. They were here last night."
The man shrugged.
They move around. Cops don't like them staying in one place. Frustrated, Ethan climbed back into the car. Try the church on 5th and San Pedro, the driver said. Sometimes the kids gather there for food in the mornings. It wasn't far. Within minutes, the Tesla turned onto a street less polished than the rest of downtown, a place where the sidewalk bore the scuffs of survival, and the air smelled faintly of mold and hope. Outside a small mission church, he spotted her. Lila was crouched beside a recycling bin, carefully picking through soda cans and plastic bottles, placing them in a makeshift sack slung over her shoulder. Her brother Noah was asleep on a tattered blanket under the church steps, curled like a kitten.
Ethan got out of the car slowly, careful not to startle her.
Lila. She froze. Then she looked up, squinting at him through the pale morning light. Recognition dawned in her expression, followed by suspicion. You came back, she said. I told you I would. She looked away, picking up another can and dropping it into the sack. You don't have to do that, Ethan said. Yes, I do, she replied. They give us 10 cents a can. If I get enough, I can buy Noah some medicine. Ethan looked over at the boy. His breathing was shallow, lips slightly blue. His fever had worsened. Come with me, Ethan said quietly.
Lila shook her head. You'll call the co.
Or social services. We'll be separated. I won't, he said. I promise. She hesitated. It wasn't that she believed him. It was that she had run out of other options. Just for a little while, she said, standing slowly. Until he gets better. Ethan opened the door to the Tesla himself. Lila climbed in, holding Noah protectively. The boy stirred, then drifted back into unconsciousness. Vanessa wasn't at the house when they arrived. Ethan had made sure of that. He carried Noah inside while Lila followed, eyes wide as she stepped into the mansion's high-ceilinged foyer. The marble floors gleamed. The air smelled like citrus and linen. This is your house? She asked, disbelief creeping into her voice. It's where I live, Ethan replied. He took Noah upstairs to a guest room and laid him gently on the bed. A private physician had already been called and was on his way. Lila hovered at the doorway, not daring to sit or touch anything. You're safe here, Ethan told her. You don't have to be afraid. I'm not afraid, she said quickly. He looked at her, skinny frame, hollow cheeks, oversized clothes that hung on her like borrowed fabric. She wasn't afraid. She was exhausted. Come with me, he said.
Let's get you cleaned up.
He showed her to a bathroom, handed her a fresh towel, and pointed to a pile of soft clothes, simple t-shirts and jeans from his niece's last visit. Lila nodded, still unsure how to respond to kindness without strings attached. While she bathed, The doctor arrived and examined Noah. The boy had a high fever, early signs of pneumonia. Nothing too severe if caught early, but in his condition, it could have turned dangerous fast. He needs rest, fluids, and antibiotics, the doctor said. You did the right thing bringing him in. After the doctor left, Lila reappeared, hair damp and skin scrubbed clean. She looked different, still herself, but no longer covered in grime and street dust. She stood silently in the hallway, watching as Ethan sat beside Noah, gently pressing a cool cloth to his forehead. You're really taking care of him, she said. Yes, Ethan replied. Why? He looked at her. Because someone should. Lila blinked, and for the first time, her posture softened. Later that afternoon, while Noah slept and the storm clouds cleared, Ethan made lunch. Nothing elaborate, just grilled cheese and tomato soup, but when he placed a bowl in front of Lila at the kitchen island, she stared at it like it was treasure. You can eat as much as you want, he said. She picked up the spoon and took a bite, then another, trying not to rush but failing. Halfway through the bowl, she looked up. You're not like the others. What do you mean? Most people, they stare or they ignore us. Or they give us food like we're pets. You juste talk. Like we matter. You do matter. She swallowed, her throat tightening. No one's ever said that to me before. He leaned across the counter, resting his arms. Well, now someone has. That evening, Lila helped wash the dishes. She moved with the precision of someone used to doing chores, even without being asked. Where's your wife? She asked. I don't have one. Girlfriend. Not anymore. Lila nodded, as if filing away that detail. When she went to check on Noah, Ethan sat back in his chair, watching the fading light stream through the tall windows. He had made billion-dollar decisions in his life. Signed contracts that shifted global markets. Built companies from nothing. But none of it, not the accolades, not the power, had ever felt like this. Like purpose. That night, he stood outside Noah's room, listening to the boy's breathing finally return to normal. Down the hall, Lila had fallen asleep in the guest bed, curled up under a real blanket for the first time in years. Ethan stood in the hallway a long time, staring at nothing, lost in thought. He didn't know what would come next. But for the first time in a long time, he knew what he wanted. To not be the man who walked away. To be the one who stayed. By the time morning broke over Los Angeles again, the house felt quieter than it had in years.
Ethan sat on the veranda, sipping his coffee and watching the sun climb over the palm.
The city outside buzzed with its usual urgency, but inside, everything was still. It had only been 24 hours since he brought Lila and Noah into his home, and yet the presence of the two children had already reshaped the energy of the place. He could feel it in the way silence no longer felt empty. There were footsteps now. Small ones. Laughter. The sound of breathing that wasn't just his own echoing through marble and glass. Lila came downstairs with her hair in a loose ponytail and Noah still sleeping upstairs. She paused when she saw Ethan, then sat cautiously at the edge of a cushioned chair across from him. You sleep okay? He asked. She shrugged.
Better than usual. Dette sa start.
There was a beat of silence before she spoke again.
Noah's fever has gone down.
Ethan smiled. I'm glad. The doctor left antibiotics in the fridge. We'll keep him on them for the next few days. Lila looked at him, her eyes narrowing as if she still couldn't fully believe what was happening. You're not gonna just send us away? Is that what you expect? It's what always happens. Ethan leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. I don't plan on doing that.
Another pause.
Lila glanced around the enormous patio. The fountain in the courtyard gurgled softly, framed by manicured hedges and imported stone statues. It was a world she had never known. You're rich, she said finally. He didn't smile. I have money. Yes. So why help us? Ethan considered that for a long moment. Because when I was your age, someone left me on the steps of a shelter. And no one came back. I know what it feels like to wait for someone who isn't coming. Lila's gaze dropped to her hands. She died last year, she said softly. Our mom. We were living in a shelter, then got moved around. When they tried to split us up, I ran. took Noah and left. You've been on the streets since then? She nodded. Why didn't you go to another shelter? They all want paperwork.
Proof of guardianship.
Without it, they call CPS. And CPS separates us. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had known the system was flawed, but hearing it from Lila, in her voice, made it real in a way statistics never had. Just then, a knock came at the front door. Ethan stood, gesturing for Lila to stay where she was. It was Vanessa. She stood in her signature stilettos, designer sunglasses pushed back into her hair, arms folded with the impatience of someone used to getting her way. You blocked my number, she said coolly. Ethan didn't answer. She looked past him into the house. I saw the photos.
You and the keys.
It's already on 2 gossip blogs. People are asking questions.
Ethan sighed. Vanessa, I'm not in the mood.
Are you seriously going to ruin your entire reputation over a couple of strays? He stepped outside, closing the door behind him. They're not strays. They're children. Human beings.
Vanessa scoffed. You're a CEO, Ethan. A public figure.
You think investors are going to look kindly on you harboring some runaway kids from the street? I don't care what they think. Yes, you do. You've spent your whole life building that company.
Don't throw it away because some sad eyes got to you. Ethan shook his head.
That's exactly the kind of thinking that makes everything feel hollow.
Don't you see that? Vanessa narrowed her eyes.
You always were soft under the surface.
I should have known it'd catch up to you.
She turned on her heel and walked down the steps, heels clicking against the stone like punctuation marks. Ethan watched her go, but he didn't feel anger. He felt relief. Later that afternoon, Lila was in the guest room reading a book when she noticed something on the nightstand.
A small, framed photo.
It was faded and old, the image of a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. Around her neck was a delicate necklace with half a heart pendant. Lila frowned. She reached up and touched the chain around her own neck. Hanging from it was a small pendant, also a half-heart. She had worn it since she was a baby. Her mother, Emma, had given it to her and told her it was part of a set, that the other half belonged to someone important. Ethan passed by the room and noticed her staring at the photo. Where did you get that necklace? He asked, stepping inside. Lila looked up, suddenly cautious again. My mom gave it to me. What was your mother's name? Emma.
Emma Grace.
Ethan froze. He walked over and picked up the photograph. This was Emma, he said. I took that picture. Lila's eyes widened. You knew my mom? I did. We were close. A long time ago. Before she disappeared. Lila's mind swirled. She looked at him differently now. Are you saying you're? I don't know, Ethan admitted. But it's possible. There was a beat of silence. 100 thoughts passed between them without a word. Finally, Ethan stood. We can find out. If you're okay with that. Lila nodded slowly. That evening, while Noah slept and the house darkened around them, Ethan sat at his desk filling out the paperwork for a DNA test. He hadn't planned on this. He hadn't expected any of it. And yet, some part of him felt steady. Like this was a path he'd been walking toward for years without knowing it. Later, as he passed by Lila's room, he paused at the door. You don't have to worry, he said softly. Even if the test says we're not related, I'm not sending you back out there. Lila looked up from the bed. I know, she said. And for the first time, she believed it.
That night, Ethan lay awake again.
But this time, it wasn't because he was restless. It was because something new had taken root inside him. Hope. The days that followed felt like suspended moments caught between hope and uncertainty. Ethan sat in his home office, the soft glow of the computer screen casting shadows on his face as he awaited the results of the DNA tests. The laboratory had promised a swift turnaround, but every minute stretched into an eternity. Lila and Noah settled into a new rhythm in the house. Lila returned to school, attending classes she had long missed, her sharp mind quickly catching up despite the years spent on the streets. Noah, though still weak, grew steadier each day with the medicine and care Ethan provided. There was laughter now, a fragile budding sound in a home once so quiet. One evening, Ethan found himself alone in the living room.
The city skyline twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows.
He clutched the photograph of Emma Grace, his long-lost love, the woman whose memory haunted him like a ghost. The necklace with the half-heart pendant lay on the table beside it. He remembered how they met, years ago in a small coffee shop in downtown Los Angeles. Emma had been radiant, brave, kind, and full of dreams that seemed too big for the world she came from. They had fallen for each other fiercely, but the realities of their worlds pulled them apart. His family, entrenched in their old money expectations, had never accepted her. His ambition blinded him. He had left her behind to pursue success, to build the empire he thought would erase all pain. He closed his eyes and swallowed the bitter taste of regret. Suddenly, his phone chimed. The message he had been waiting for. DNA results available. Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he clicked open the file. He scanned the report carefully, his heart pounding against his ribs. No genetic relationship. The words echoed in the silent room, heavy and undeniable. He read it twice, thrice, unwilling to accept the truth. The test was clear. Lila and Noah were not his biological children. A cold wave washed over him. His first instinct was confusion, then denial, and finally a crushing sense of loss. The necklace, the name, the memories, they all felt like threads woven into a tapestry he believed was his family, but now unraveled before his eyes. He sank into his chair, the weight of failure pressing down. If they weren't his blood, what did that mean for his promises?
For the trust in Lila's eyes, for Noah's fragile smile?
He had prepared to be a father, to make up for a lifetime of mistakes. But biology had drawn a line he couldn't cross.
For hours, Ethan sat there, battling the storm within.
Then a quiet realization began to dawn. Love was not just a matter of genes. He thought back to every moment he had shared with Lila and Noah, their laughter, their tears, their fears. He remembered the warmth that filled the house the first time Lila smiled freely in months. The gentle way Noah reached for him in the night. The way they had become a family, forged not by blood but by choice. He reached for the half-heart pendant and held it tight. "I don't need a DNA test to know you're mine," he whispered into the empty room. The next morning, Ethan found Lila in the kitchen, carefully preparing breakfast. She looked up when he entered. He took a deep breath. "The test came back," he said gently. Lila's expression tightened. "We're not related," he continued.
Not by blood. For a moment, she said nothing.
Then she met his eyes, steady and unafraid. "That doesn't matter," she said firmly. "You're the only dad I've ever had." Ethan felt a lump rise in his throat. "I want you to know," he said, "that no matter what, I'm here.
And I'm not going anywhere."
Lila smiled, a real warm smile that filled the room with light. "Me neither." That afternoon, Ethan called his attorney to discuss next steps. He wanted to make sure Lila and Noah were legally his children, not just in heart but in name. Adoption papers would take time, but he was determined to see it through. Yet, despite this personal victory, the outside world was beginning to close in. News outlets had caught wind of the story. Rumors swirled about the billionaire taking in street children. Tabloids questioned his motives, speculating on scandals and secrets. Social media buzzed with hashtags, some supportive, others cruel. Vanessa Stone's voice returned like an unwelcome echo, her criticisms amplified by the press. She had hired a public relations firm to discredit Ethan, aiming to reclaim her own position in the spotlight. But Ethan was no longer concerned with appearances. He spent his days in the quiet company of Lila and Noah, building a life grounded in the simple truths of family, trust, care, and unconditional love. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ethan found Lila and Noah on the back patio, watching the stars appear. Noah pointed upward with a weak smile. "Look, Dad," he said, "there's the Big Dipper." Ethan sat beside them, wrapping an arm around each child.
"Good eye, buddy."
Lila leaned her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd have a place like this," she said softly. "You deserve it," Ethan replied. As the night deepened, Ethan understood that the past could not be changed, but the future was theirs to write. And family, real family, was about more than bloodlines. It was about the heart. The days after receiving the DNA test results were some of the most difficult Ethan Walker had ever faced. The cold reality that Lila and Noah were not biologically his children weighed heavily on him, threatening to undo the fragile sense of family they had begun to build. Yet beneath that initial shock, a deeper truth began to take root: love was not defined by genetics alone. But the world outside Ethan's home was far less forgiving. News of the billionaire tech CEO taking in 2 homeless children had leaked, and the media frenzy was swift and merciless. Headlines ranged from sympathetic to scandalous.
Tabloïd peintait d'Ethan à man seeking redemption through an elaborate publicity stunt.
Critics questioned his motives and sanity. Social media erupted with heated debates. Some praised his generosity, others dismissed it as naivete or desperation. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere grew tense. Vanessa Stone, fueled by jealousy and the desire to regain control, intensified her campaign to discredit Ethan. She hired a team of public relations experts and investigative journalists to dig into every corner of his life, hoping to expose secrets that would force him to retreat. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day of media interviews and public scrutiny, Ethan sat with Lila and Noah in the family room. The children, sensing his weariness, huddled close, offering quiet comfort. "Dad," Lila said softly, "do you think they'll understand? That we're really a family?" Ethan smiled, though fatigue lined his face. "They'll try to tell you what family is supposed to look like," he said. "But family is what we choose to be. And no one can take that away from us." Noah yawned, leaning against Ethan's chest. The simplicity of that moment, the warmth, the trust, reminded Ethan why he was willing to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Despite the chaos, Ethan made a decision. He would legally adopt Lila and Noah, solidifying their bond beyond public opinion or biology. It was a complex process involving courts, background checks, and legal hurdles, but he was prepared to navigate every obstacle. As the adoption papers were prepared, a surprising visitor arrived. Mr. Reed, a retired elementary school teacher from Lila's old neighborhood, came to the mansion with a weathered envelope in hand. He introduced himself as someone who had known Emma Grace, Lila's mother, many years ago. With a solemn voice, Mr. Reed shared stories of Emma, a bright, compassionate woman who had faced hardship with unwavering strength. He spoke of her dreams, her struggles, and her last days spent caring for her children despite overwhelming odds. He handed Ethan a letter Emma had written but never sent. In it, Emma mentioned a man named George, her father, who had refused to acknowledge her or the children, leaving them to fend for themselves. Ethan read the letter, the words cutting deeper than any DNA test.
George Walker.
His own father. The man who had pressured him to abandon his relationship with Emma, the man who had chosen reputation over family. Ethan's world tilted on its axis. This revelation transformed his understanding of Lila and Noah's story. They were not just lost children, they were family. Yet, fractured and abandoned by the very people who should have protected them. That night, Ethan confronted his father on the phone. "Why?"
Ethan demanded.
"Why did you let them suffer?
Why did you turn your back on your own flesh and blood?"
George's voice was cold, dismissive. "Those decisions were made for the good of the family. You don't understand the sacrifices necessary to maintain our legacy." "I understand enough," Ethan replied bitterly. "I'm making a different choice." The call ended abruptly. For the first time, Ethan fully grasped the legacy he was rejecting, not wealth or power, but cold indifference. The next day, Ethan gathered Lila and Noah. "We're going to fight for our family," he told them. "Not because of blood, but because of love." As weeks passed, Ethan's resolve only strengthened. He began to use his influence and resources not just for himself, but to advocate for children like Lila and Noah, those lost in the system, overlooked and forgotten. He launched initiatives to improve foster care, to provide education and medical support to homeless youth. The media narrative slowly shifted, from scandal to admiration. Meanwhile, Vanessa's efforts to undermine him faltered, and she eventually retreated from the public eye. One afternoon, as Ethan watched Lila and Noah playing in the garden, he felt a profound sense of peace. They had survived storms far worse than the Los Angeles rain. Together, they were building a home where none had existed. And in that home, he had finally found what he had been searching for all his life. Not a legacy of wealth or power.
But a legacy of love.
The media storm surrounding Ethan Walker's decision to take in Lila and Noah intensified with a ferocity that surprised even him. What began as a few curious reports quickly spiraled into a relentless barrage of headlines, speculation, and sensationalism. Every move he made was scrutinized, every gesture toward the children was dissected under the unforgiving glare of public opinion. The tabloids thrived on controversy, twisting facts and fabricating narratives. Some called the children street urchins, exploiting Ethan's fortune. Others accused the billionaire of a hidden agenda, a desperate bid for sympathy or a cover-up of a secret past. Social media exploded with divided voices. Some praised Ethan's compassion, while others lambasted his decisions as reckless and naive.
Inside the Walker family's private estate, the tension mounted.
Ethan's father, George Walker, the patriarch of the family empire, was furious. His calls were sharp and insistent. "Ethan, this is madness," George barked over the phone during one heated conversation. "You're ruining everything we've built. The board is demanding you remove those children immediately. This isn't charity. This is a business." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're not just children, Dad. They're family. And I won't abandon them." George's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're making a mistake that will cost you everything, your position, your inheritance, your reputation. Think carefully before it's too late." Ethan hung up, his resolve only deepening. But the pressure was relentless. Board members and investors began to question Ethan's leadership. The company's stock price wavered, shaken by the negative publicity. Whispers of a coup circulated within the corporate corridors, with some factions eager to capitalize on Ethan's perceived vulnerability. Meanwhile, Vanessa Stone seized the moment. With calculated precision, she made public appearances criticizing Ethan's choices, framing them as reckless and damaging to the company's image. Her statements found eager ears among the skeptical public, fueling the firestorm. One afternoon, Ethan received a formal notice from the company's legal department. The board had voted to suspend his executive powers pending a review. The message was clear: his leadership was being challenged, and the family was mobilizing to force him out. But the greatest blow came when social services intervened. Citing concerns over the children's welfare amid the media frenzy, authorities demanded that Lila and Noah be placed in foster care temporarily, pending investigation. The decision was devastating. Ethan stood in the sterile office of the Child Welfare Agency, heart heavy as he watched two social workers explain the situation. His protests were met with procedural coldness. "We understand your concerns, Mr. Walker, but this is standard protocol. The children's safety is our priority." Lila clung to Ethan's hand, tears streaming down her face.
"Please, don't let them take us."
Noah whimpered softly, his small body trembling. Ethan held them close, fighting back his own despair. The separation was not just physical, it felt like a tearing of the fragile family bond they had worked so hard to build. In the days that followed, Ethan was barred from visiting Lila and Noah freely. The children's new foster placements were in facilities far from the city, and the legal battles to regain custody dragged on with agonizing slowness. The public's attention shifted, some expressing sympathy, others turning cold. The hashtag Save Lila and Noah began to circulate among supporters, but it was a faint echo against the machinery of bureaucracy and family politics. At night, Ethan lay awake, haunted by the image of Lila's tear-streaked face and Noah's fragile frame. He felt powerless in a way he never had before. Yet, amid the darkness, a fire burned brighter. He vowed not to give up. He hired the best legal team, prepared for a fight that would consume him. He reached out to allies, advocates for children's rights, and activists to bring public awareness to Lila and Noah's plight. Lila, despite the upheaval, held on to hope. In whispered conversations during visits, she promised Ethan she would be strong, that they would be reunited. Noah, too young to fully understand, clung to memories of warmth and safety. Ethan's world had narrowed to one goal: to bring his family back together, no matter the cost. And as the wheels of justice slowly turned, the battle for Lila and Noah's future was only just beginning. The decision wasn't easy. Ethan Walker sat alone in his high-rise office overlooking the city skyline, the weight of the world pressing heavily on his shoulders. The polished walls and sleek furniture, the symbols of his success, suddenly felt cold and hollow. The empire he had built, the fortune he had inherited, and the power he wielded all seemed meaningless without Lila and Noah by his side. He knew what had to be done. The next morning, Ethan summoned his closest advisors and the board of directors to an emergency meeting. The atmosphere was tense, the room charged with anticipation. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ethan began, his voice steady but resolute. "Effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO and chairman of Walker Technologies." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Faces turned pale, some exchanged worried glances. Ethan continued. "My priority now is my family, Lila and Noah. I cannot, in good conscience, lead this company while my children are torn from me by legal battles and corporate machinations." One board member interrupted.
Ethan, this is reckless.
"You're abandoning your responsibilities at a critical time for the company." Ethan met his gaze without flinching.
No.
"I'm reclaiming my responsibility as a father. This company will survive without me.
My children may not."
He laid out his plan to transfer all his shares to a trust and hand over leadership to an interim CEO. The room was stunned into silence. After the meeting, Ethan felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. The familiar trappings of his life were slipping away, but the unknown future held a fragile hope. In the weeks that followed, Ethan moved out of the mansion, choosing instead a modest home near the city's community where Lila and Noah had been placed. He dedicated every moment to rebuilding his family, fighting the legal system, and advocating for reform in child welfare. At the foster care center, visits with Lila and Noah became the only source of light in the long battle. Though restricted, Ethan poured his heart into every second he spent with them, reading stories, sharing meals, and promising a future together. Meanwhile, the public narrative began to shift once more. Media outlets sympathetic to Ethan's plight ran human interest stories highlighting the flaws in the foster care system and the challenges faced by families like his. Social media campaigns gained momentum, rallying support from strangers inspired by his courage. But the pressure from his own family was relentless. George Walker and other relatives continued to oppose Ethan's choices, viewing his resignation as weakness and betrayal. Legal challenges mounted, and the fight for custody dragged on, wearing down everyone involved. One evening, after a particularly grueling court hearing, Ethan sat with Lila and Noah in a small cafe near the foster home. The children's faces were tired but resilient. "Dad," Lila said quietly, "do you think we'll ever have a real home again?" Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "We will. And this time, it's forever." Noah nodded, leaning against Ethan's arm. In that moment, Ethan understood that leaving the throne was not the end, but the beginning of a new reign, a reign of love, sacrifice, and devotion. He had traded power for purpose. And in doing so, had found the strength to be the father they needed. The modest house Ethan had rented was a stark contrast to the sprawling mansion he had left behind. It was small but warm, nestled in a quiet neighborhood not far from downtown Los Angeles. To Ethan, it was more than just a home, it was a symbol of a new beginning, a chance to build a life on his own terms. Lila and Noah adapted quickly to the change. The familiar walls, the simple furniture, and the absence of marble and glass made the house feel cozy and safe. The neighborhood was bustling with families and neighbors who smiled as they passed by, offering a sense of community that Lila and Noah had never known. Ethan took on the role of father with an earnestness that surprised even himself. Mornings began with simple breakfasts, cereal or toast, before Lila headed to her new school, where she was enrolled through a local program that offered support for children in foster care. Noah's health improved steadily under Ethan's care, his energy returning with each passing day. Despite the calm inside the house, outside forces continued to challenge their fragile peace. George Walker's opposition did not wane. At family gatherings and board meetings, his voice loomed large, questioning Ethan's decisions and painting his departure as a reckless folly. The Walker family's social circle whispered about scandal and disgrace, and some business partners hesitated to align with a man perceived as unstable. The media continued to watch Ethan's every move. Though the initial frenzy had cooled, whispers remained, often laced with skepticism. Yet, amidst the scrutiny, support grew from unexpected places: advocacy groups, local leaders, and even former critics who saw in Ethan's struggle a call for systemic change. Ethan channeled this momentum into action. He founded the Grace Foundation, named after Lila and Noah's mother, dedicated to supporting children in foster care and advocating for reform. The foundation worked tirelessly to provide resources, education, and medical assistance to children like Lila and Noah, those caught between broken systems and broken homes. Lila flourished in school. Her intelligence and determination impressed teachers and classmates alike. She began dreaming aloud of becoming a doctor, inspired by the care Noah had received and her own experiences navigating illness and hardship. Noah, buoyed by his improved health, grew more playful and curious each day. His laughter filled the house, a balm for the wounds they all carried. Yet, the shadows of their past lingered. One afternoon, as Ethan drove Lila and Noah home from school, his phone buzzed with an urgent message, a legal challenge from George, seeking to revoke Ethan's custody based on claims of instability and poor judgment. The court battle reignited, dragging the family back into the public eye and forcing them to relive painful memories. Legal fees mounted, and the emotional toll was heavy. But Ethan refused to falter. With the support of his legal team and the growing community behind the Grace Foundation, he prepared to fight, not just for custody, but for the dignity and future of Lila and Noah. During late-night conversations, Ethan reminded the children of their strength. "We're more than their doubts and fears," he said. "We're a family, and families fight for each other." Lila, mature beyond her years, nodded with quiet resolve. "We'll win. Not because of money or power, but because of love." The battle was far from over. Yet, in the warmth of their small home, surrounded by love and hope, Ethan, Lila, and Noah found the courage to face whatever came next. Together they were building not just a new life, but a legacy, one defined not by blood, but by unbreakable bonds and unwavering faith. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with an energy that reflected more than just the legal battle unfolding within its walls. Cameras clicked incessantly, capturing every expression, every whispered conversation. Reporters filled the benches, eager to witness a case that had become a symbol of a larger fight, the fight for family, dignity, and justice. Ethan Walker sat at the defense table, his suit neatly pressed but his eyes weary. Lila and Noah were beside him, holding hands tightly. Despite the nerves that fluttered in his chest, Ethan felt a quiet determination settle over him. This was not just about winning custody, it was about proving the strength of their bond, the power of love over bloodlines and social prejudice. The plaintiff, represented by an aggressive legal team hired by George Walker, laid out their case with calculated precision. They painted Ethan as reckless, unfit to care for the children, and motivated by personal whimsy rather than genuine concern. They called into question his ability to provide a stable environment and highlighted his resignation from the family company as evidence of instability. But when it was Ethan's turn to speak, he rose slowly and looked around the room with calm conviction. "Your Honor," he began, "I stand here not just as a man fighting for custody, but as a father who has chosen love over convenience, family over fortune." He recounted the story of meeting Lila and Noah on the streets, their struggles, their bravery, and the promises he made to them. He spoke of the countless nights spent caring for Noah's fever, of Lila's determination to thrive despite the odds, and of the foundation he had established to help children like them. "Our family is not defined by DNA alone," Ethan said, his voice steady and resolute. "It is defined by commitment, by sacrifice, and by unconditional love. I ask this court to recognize that." As Ethan spoke, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. The judge listened attentively, her gaze never wavering. The spectators leaned forward, moved by the sincerity in his words. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Supporters carrying signs reading "Family is Love" and "Justice for Lila and Noah" filled the steps. Media coverage painted the trial as a battle between old money and new values, privilege and compassion. Social media campaigns gained momentum, with thousands sharing their own stories of family and fighting for the ones they love. The hashtag #FamilyIsLove trended nationwide, sparking conversations about the flaws in the foster care system and the importance of chosen families. Meanwhile, voices from unexpected places emerged. Former critics softened their stance, inspired by Ethan's humility and dedication. Advocates for children's rights rallied to his cause, offering expert testimony on the importance of stability and emotional bonds in child welfare. During breaks in the trial, Lila's teachers and community leaders appeared in court to vouch for her well-being and progress. They described a bright, determined young girl who had blossomed under Ethan's care. Noah's pediatrician testified about his medical improvement and the positive environment Ethan provided. The tide was turning. Behind the scenes, George Walker's legal team scrambled to counter the growing public sympathy and mounting evidence. But the narrative was no longer theirs to control. On the final day of the trial, the judge delivered her verdict. She acknowledged the complex nature of family and the importance of biological ties, but emphasized that the best interests of the children must prevail above all. After careful consideration of the evidence, testimonies, and the children's well-being, she ruled in favor of Ethan Walker's custody. The courtroom erupted in quiet relief and applause. Ethan gathered Lila and Noah into a tight embrace, tears slipping down his cheeks. "This is our home," he whispered. "Forever." The story didn't end with the verdict. Ethan's victory became a catalyst for change. The Grace Foundation gained national recognition, attracting support and funding to expand its programs. Conversations about child welfare reform entered the mainstream, challenging outdated perceptions and policies. For Lila and Noah, the ruling meant more than legal custody. It meant safety, belonging, and a chance to dream without fear. Ethan, once a man defined by power and wealth, had found his true legacy not in his empire, but in the family he had fought so fiercely to protect. As the sun set over the city that evening, Ethan stood with his children on the steps of the courthouse. The world was watching, but for the first time, he felt truly seen, not as a billionaire, but as a father. The verdict had set in motion a new chapter for Ethan, Lila, and Noah, one defined by healing, hope, and the promise of a future built together. The court's decision was more than just a legal win. It was a triumph of love over adversity, a powerful reminder that family is not merely a matter of blood but a bond forged through commitment and care. Ethan returned to the modest house they now called home with his children, their hands intertwined, their steps lighter than they had been in months. The neighborhood welcomed them with quiet warmth. Neighbors waved, children played in the streets, and the world felt just a little bit kinder. Inside, the house was alive with laughter and light. The worn walls bore witness to stories shared over simple meals, to the gentle rituals of bedtime stories and whispered dreams. It was no longer just a shelter from the storms outside, but a sanctuary filled with love. Lila had blossomed beyond Ethan's expectations. Her grades soared, her friendships deepened, and her dreams took shape. She spoke often of becoming a doctor, not just for herself but for children like Noah, children who deserved a chance at health and happiness. Noah's fragile beginnings seemed a distant memory. He ran and played with the boundless energy of a child free from fear, his laughter ringing through the rooms like music.
Ethan, tout, transformed.
The man who once measured success in wealth and power had found fulfillment in the quiet moments, teaching Noah to ride a bike, cheering on Lila at school events, and simply being present. Together, they built traditions that stitched their lives closer. Weekend hikes, movie nights, and gardening in the small backyard created a rhythm of belonging. The Grace Foundation flourished, becoming a beacon of hope for families struggling against the odds. Ethan used his experience and resources not only to provide shelter and care but to advocate for systemic change. His story inspired others to look beyond bloodlines, to recognize the families formed through love and resilience. At public events, Ethan spoke candidly about his journey, the mistakes, the regrets, and the redemptive power of choice. He encouraged society to embrace a broader definition of family, one inclusive of all who nurture and protect. Though the shadows of the past never fully disappeared, they no longer held dominion over their lives. Ethan maintained a cautious distance from his father and the family empire, choosing instead to forge a legacy rooted in empathy and compassion. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan sat on the porch with Lila and Noah. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. Noah pointed upward.
Look, Dad, the star.
Lila smiled, leaning against Ethan's side. We're lucky, aren't we? Ethan nodded, his heart full. Yes, he said softly. Because we found each other. Because family isn't just what you're born into, it's what you build. As night fell, the three sat together beneath the vast expanse of the universe, connected by love, hope, and the unbreakable bond of chosen family. In that moment, Ethan understood the true meaning of home. Not a place or a title, but a sanctuary made by hearts willing to love fiercely and fight relentlessly. Their story was no longer just theirs, it was a testament to the power of compassion, a beacon for anyone searching for belonging in a world that often forgets what truly matters. And as the stars shone above, so did their legacy, an enduring light in the tapestry of human connection.